Holy crap.
People persist in doubting the evidence.
Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
We're turning all of our antennas towards Jimmy Church on Dark Matter Radio.
And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Ha ha ha! All right. I almost changed things up. I was going to do something like, I'm your host, Jimmy Church, and this is Fade to Black. How you doing? Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. Today's Wednesday, November 26th, 330 days into the new year, 35 days left. Can you believe it? Where did it go? Some people want to know. Live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in Burbank, California, for KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your so humble host, Jimmy Church. Night before Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I'm going to say that a few times tonight. It is such an epic day of the year for me because I love to eat and I love my family, and the two go together cosmically. Line up tomorrow. I'm serious. I love Thanksgiving. I really do. What's everybody going to be eating? Turkey, of course. But I mean, and I'm out here. It's so culturally diverse here in Los Angeles. But I wave the Midwest flag proud. I do. I make demands with my culturally diverse family. I want my stuffing. I want my homemade cranberry sauce. I want my homemade gravy. I want my mashed taters. I want my turkey. I want my pumpkin pie. I want some cranberry juice. I want some wine. And whatever, green bean casserole. You know what I'm talking about. There's certain things that got to be on that plate. Gravy on everything. Cranberry sauce on everything. I don't know about you guys, but I do cranberry sauce on my on my stuffing, on my turkey, on my potatoes, and then I gravy all of that too, all over the top. Why does gravy, eating in family, sounds like The Walking Dead? Why does gravy and cranberry sauce go together? Does anybody have any clue? Or is it because Ann Bacon, Dave C says, why sweet potatoes, pumpkin pie, apple butter, pumpkin pie? Ooh. Cranberries, though. Yeah, Space Boy cranberry. Why is it because we get acclimated to it? Or do you think, you're a year old, do this for me. You're a year old. You got a couple teeth sprouting. You're starting to eat some food. And somebody jams some cranberry sauce and gravy in you. Are you going for that? Are you? I would think so. Does go to bacon-wrapped green beans covered in maple syrup. Yum. That actually sounds good. Tonight, I'm alone in the studio. Whoa was at home cooking. So there's that. So, it is what it is. Man, I did a couple of Costco runs. Did one yesterday, one today. And I got to tell you, oh, man. Oh, Lou Sheehan just tweeted. I don't know what Lou needs to get out of the house more often. He's like, dude, I got to fact check your day of the year. Lou, go to epochconverter.com. It'll tell you what day of the year it is and how many days remain. Jeez. Like I'm not. What am I, stupid? The producers here stupid. epochconverter.com. Man, get a life. TalkStream Live. Yes, let's retweet that. I mean, I want Fade to Black questions to be crystal clear, so I don't have, when I look over, it's something sensible that is there. But Lou just said, I better fact check that on the Interbox. Okay, Epoch Converter. There you go. November 26, 2014 is day number 330. There are 35 days remaining in the year. The year is a number between 1 and 360. The day of the year is a number between 1 and 365. January 1st is day 1. Go do the math. My Lord. Okay. All right. Let's go. We got a great show tonight. We got a lot to do. We got a lot to pack in. We will have Doug Aldrich with us here in about 10 minutes. Excited about that. And then Linda Moulton Howe will be joining us at the bottom of the hour. I am ready. Tomorrow we are off. There will be a best of tomorrow night. I told Keith, I said, run Graham Hancock. If somebody's going to listen on Thanksgiving evening, give them something to listen to. Do some Graham. So I think we're going to run Graham Hancock tomorrow night. But all the shows are good. But I thought, for a treat, a Thanksgiving treat. Graham Hancock. Big salute to the proud men and women in uniform all around the world right now. This is Thanksgiving, that are out there that can't be home with family, friends. They're having Thanksgiving dinner with their mates out there. Happy Thanksgiving, and a big salute to everything that you do. All right, and you doing that allows us to have Thanksgiving dinner with our friends and family here. So thank you so much for that. All right, faders.org. I've got one comment to make, and it is this, and I'm quoting, "It is amazing what Kali and a little netstat can do to provide all the information needed." End quote. You decipher that yourself. Today, singer Tina Turner is 75 years old. Unbelievable. 75. Bassist John McVie is 69. He put the Mac in Fleetwood Mac. That's right. He married pianist and singer Christine Perfect, and who became Christine McVie, and took all of those issues and wrote the album Rumors. That's right. That thing sold about 1 billion copies. Just goes to show you. Every time you hear a really cool song, cool love song, you hear that good blues song, good romantics, and you just listen to that, and all you got to do is sit back and go, somebody broke their heart. That's how it happens. That's how it happens. All of that good stuff comes from something really, really bad. A lot of sleepless nights. James Taylor comes to mind. Enough of that. Our dead guy's birthday today is Charles Schultz. Born in 1922, died in 2000. He gave us Charlie Brown. End of story. And, without Charles Schultz, we don't have Charlie Brown Christmas. Think about that. Charles Schultz gave us Charlie Brown, our dead guy's birthday today. Twitter, I am still getting email over the best movie quotes ever. What I'm going to do tonight, and it looks like it's all going down anyway. What do you guys, is anybody doing crazy stuff for Thanksgiving? As far as, I'm not talking about fighting with your family. I mean, that's going to go down. I'll have a good fight tomorrow. It's part of Thanksgiving. It's great. You got to look forward to that. And that's not what I'm referring to. Is there something that you guys cook for Thanksgiving dinner that's different? I like the standard stuff. Bam, 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 bam. But does your family do anything out of the box? Not deep fried turkey. That's a trend. That's kind of passe. I'm sure somebody is going to tweet now. What? Everybody deep fries turkey. That's the best. That's the best, man. What are you talking about? Well, okay. Enough houses burned down here in California with people that did know what they were doing. Eating surfers' fried rice. Interesting. All right. Yeah. What's going to hit your table that is a little different, a little off the beaten path, something a little strange? Bacon wrapped turkey? Really? Walter, are you really doing a bacon wrapped turkey? Donna says she cooks their turkey on a solar cooker. Bob is going to do ham. Okay. Michael Anderson says we blow up pumpkins with shotguns in the backyard of Cloverdale. Charles says George Aruda says, I met Charles Schultz when I delivered to his hospital room. It was astounding. He even said, good grief. What a gentleman. Let's see. Once at an Xmas dinner at a truck stop for fun. Just went in to be weird, and that's when I was a kid. Sherilyn, I have no idea what that means. You need to clarify that one. Jonas says Guidos have a full, oh yeah, really? Pasta with gravy and meat. Then turkey. Is that right? Is that right? Italians do that? I don't know if I've ever had an Italian Thanksgiving dinner. That's interesting. Okay. All right, let's get to some email because Doug's coming up in 5 minutes. No news tonight. It kind of feels kind of weird. I had all of this cool news stuff lined up, and I thought, man, I can't really pack it in. What do I do? Do we move Linda back 15 minutes? Do we bring Doug in at 7:30? Do I just bounce the news and have fun? And I thought, you know what? I'm going to bounce the news. So the news got bounced. You can email throughout the show, Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at jchurchradio. Easy enough to do. Hashtag DMRadioNet. I announce it every single night. Come hang out with us in the sandbox. Got this email from Ian. He says, I've been listening. Oh, by the way, he's from over the pond. He's in the UK. He says, I've just been re-listening to the Gary Heseltine show for the 8th time, and I'm certain John Teeter 2 is nuts. Also, is Dino really Jesse Ventura? Where does everybody? What do people hear? I don't hear the Jesse Ventura slang or aspect or tone in Dino's voice, but I have gotten so much email about this. I don't know where it started. Is Dino Jesse Ventura? I don't know. Dino lives here in Cali, I thought. Doesn't Jesse live in Minnesota? I don't know. Or could it be? I don't know. What are you people hearing? Or is it what he says and not so much the tone? I find that so interesting. I had to read the email. This email comes in from Deborah Cox, and she pointed me to this article, which I did read, by the way, and it was long. She says, an ex-NASA employee says she saw two people on Mars approach the Viking lander on Mars in 1979. That's right. She's an ex-employee. She called in to Coast to Coast. Why didn't she call in to Fade to Black? I don't know. Hope you're having a happy Thanksgiving with the family. Have a piece of pie for me. That is from Deborah. I went and read the article. The employee's name was Jackie, or the caller, her name was Jackie. And she said that there was a couple of guys in suits, came up over the horizon and approached the Viking lander. They got kind of close, and then the video cut out. Her and the other employees that were there that were monitoring the video feed ran upstairs. They were watching the feed from Viking, ran upstairs to their boss's office, and then there was a bunch of paper taped over the window, and the door was locked. They couldn't go in. They didn't know what was up. And that was in 1979. Now, I was sent before this article came out, about 2 months ago, somebody sent me the panoramic, 18 megabyte file of this, and I couldn't find it. Rita and I blew that up in Photoshop on one of our huge monitors, one of those 3-footers, and moved that thing around. We could not see what everybody is talking. I couldn't see. I can't make it out. And the guy that sent us the emails, no, it's right there. Look, we couldn't see it. So I have no idea. Certainly, the International Business Times, IB, wrote this article today. You can go and check it out. I'll see if I can post it before the end of the show tonight. Remember, I'm running solo. Feels good to run solo. Feels different. I feel free. I do. This is Fade to Black. When I come back after the break, it's going to be this guy right here, Doug Aldrich. This is Fade to Black. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Tonight, Linda Moulton Howe at the bottom of the hour. When I come back off the break, Doug Aldrich. And let's get this done. Shoot me an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Follow us on Twitter @JChurchRadio. Let's get this cracking. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, and I will be back right after this. Stay with us.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, you have tuned into the latest phenomenon in late night talk radio, Fade to Black, starring the inimitable Jimmy Church, showcasing his continuing quest in pursuit of knowledge of the strange and paranormal. Sit back, open your mind, and let's get cracking.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National Tax Experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. It doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil 3-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Welcome back. Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We are only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Shoot me an email right now to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. You can follow us on Twitter. Twitter's lighting up. We'll probably burn through 3,000 tweets tonight. Come hang out. Hashtag DMRadioNet. That's what you want to do. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And I would like to welcome to the program a really good friend of Fade to Black, our close friend, Doug Aldrich. Hey, Doug, it's pretty cool listening to your stuff as bumper music, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Hey, Jimmy, how are you, man? Thanks for having me on, brother.
Hey, brother, it's all back at you, and thank you so much. And I do want to say, for all of the Fadernauts out there, we've been using your music all year. And they love it. And I just want to say, for all of the Fadernauts, thank you for letting us do that, man. It's such a treat.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank the Fadernauts because the Fadernauts rule. That's it.
They do, don't they? Hey, Doug. I was thinking before the show about Thanksgiving and what it has meant to you and I as friends over the years, and how so many years ago, it seems like a lifetime ago now, that you and I would get together for Thanksgiving, and we would always, share Thanksgiving dinners together. And here we are so many years later. Our careers have gone in different directions. Our life has gone in different directions, although we're neighbors. But how has life changed for you?
It's always getting better. Every day it's getting better and better. I'm super blessed. I have a great wife. Her name is Danny. She's from Cologne, Germany, and she's awesome. And I'm very thankful for her. And another thing that, since you and I used to hang out all the time, like you said, and life intercedes. And one of the part of the life that intercedes is that I have a son called Ryder.
Yeah, he rocks.
Is 5, and he's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. It's awesome. So my life changed a little bit recently, leaving Whitesnake and kind of focusing a little closer to home so I could be with the family, and that's what I've been doing.
I'll say this before we move on. Thanksgiving is so important, and I used to watch you with my daughters when they were so young, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, and how you just love kids. Now you've got Ryder, and I can only imagine you must be the coolest friggin' dad like ever.
I don't know about that, but I definitely try to be the best dad I can. I got a lot to learn. We could probably talk about that all night long, because you're a great dad. But anyway, I'm just life's gotten better and better, and for both of us, and really blessed. And Thanksgiving is a good time to remember all that stuff and be thankful and just take a time out. It's best, to be obviously, if you can be with family and friends and stuff. But either way, you've got your immediate family with you. That doesn't matter where you are. It's all good.
Exactly. So again, happy Thanksgiving. Let's move on. We've got very little time, so let's pack in as much as we can
Cool.
Over the next few minutes. But the first thing in the big news that hit the media this week, they're calling it a supergroup, Doug. I haven't heard that term in a long time. But Revolution Saints, Dean Castronovo, Jack Blades, yourself, you just have to tell us all about it. What's going on?
It just kind of came together. It was very spontaneous, and it appeared out of nowhere, actually. That it originally started off as Dean's kind of solo project, and then they decided let's get Jack Blades to play bass. Those guys are friends, and Jack is I think they played together on Jack's solo stuff, and they've been friends for years, both Northern California guys. And then when talking about what guitar players they might like to work with for this project, my name came up, and then all of a sudden the record company said, you know what, that's more of a band than a project. So it kind of turned into a serious band situation at that point, and we began recording. I guess it was about June or so, and recorded through August, and then turned over the stuff, and it was mixed by a really talented. He's kind of a up and coming producer, Alessandro Del Vecchio. He's an Italian guy, and the record turned out really good. I don't know if supergroup is the right, I just look at it as a group of friends. I'm friends with both those guys, and
well, I have to ask. I'm going to cut you off because we're going to run out of time, and I got to get this question.
Okay.
Who's singing?
Dean is singing. He's got a massive voice.
He does.
He sings when you go see Journey live. Dean sings a couple of songs by himself while he's playing drums, and I guess people started to realize this guy's got a killer voice.
He does,
and that's when they decided to kind of prepare this solo project for him. but it just turned into a group effort, and it turned out really good. It's very different. It's very, very melodic. It's not metal. It's like a heavy melodic record, and everybody put their stamp on it, and it's turned out good. And
how did Jack take it? I mean, because he's got the pipes of a gift from God.
Yeah, he's got killer pipes too, and he sang. They did a duet together that was really cool. It's called "Turn Back Time." I think that might be like the first single, and but my favorite songs are there's a song called "Back on My Trail" that's really cool that I love, and also "Here Forever" is another song that is kind of like cornerstone track of that record. But people can check it out little by little. It's starting to hit Facebook, Revolution Saints or Facebook.com/Revolution Saints. But you can always go through my Facebook too, or there'll be some press coming out about it, kind of like every week now. I'm trying to gear up for a February release.
February 15th, I think, is the date. We'll keep all of that posted here at JimmyChurchRadio.com, and we'll announce everything as it comes out. But one of the things I wanted to get to that you wanted to get to when we were talking earlier today, you're like, Jimmy, what else are we going to talk about? Well, we could talk about Thanksgiving. We can talk about our friendship. We could talk about no. What else are we going to talk about? Well, Doug? What do you want to talk about? And so,
well, no, I mean your show is so cool, and you're like you. First of all, congratulations on your success on the show and everything you're doing. I'm really proud of you. You for the people, for the Fadernauts and other people. Jimmy Church is multi talented. He's an expertise. He's very knowledgeable at many different things, and now he's become an expert on. I get on dark matter or
all those strange
faded black.
Yeah, all those strange. Well, and you said, Jimmy, I'm living out here in Las Vegas, and I see strange stuff all the time, and I want to talk about that. And so, what have you? You're out there every night. What are you seeing in the skies out there?
Well, check it out. This is my routine because I live in LA still, but I'm here. I'm doing a show called Raiding the Rock Vault in Vegas. It's a really cool show. It's a kind of a classic rock supergroup with Howard Leese and Robin McCauley and Hugh McDonald from Bon Jovi. So we do this thing about 6 nights a week right now. And then I drive home at the end of I think the last show per week is Wednesday night. And I drive home at midnight through the desert. We're talking like, it's one of those deserts where you see a lot of crazy stuff in the middle of the night. And immediately I started seeing, I see these shooting stars that are, they're just the brightest ones I've ever seen in my whole life, and almost look unreal. It's almost like, wait a minute, what was that?
Right.
But and there's also a lot of experimental things out in the desert, out in Spotlight, Nevada. There is a kind of a solar farm where there's probably, it looks like about 10 square miles of reflectors on the ground that shoot up to these big kind of light gathering
collectors.
And and that's just, it looks like right out of I don't know if anybody's seen that stuff, but if you Google Spotlight, Nevada, you'll see the solar plant, and it looks like when you're driving past it, it looks like something right off of a Pink Floyd album cover or a Yes album cover, something just unreal. But in the desert, all bets are off, man. Things are flying around. You see insects of that you've never seen in your life. That epic proportions, and definitely there's a big mystery out in the desert.
There is, and you've got Area 51 right there, and you can only imagine. I've been to Vegas 100 times, but I haven't spent a bunch of time there where I was always able to go outside and look at the skies. I know there's stuff going on all the time. Man,
I tell you what, I see it every time I drive home at night. It's crazy. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I wrap myself in tinfoil before I get in the car so I can be No, I'm just kidding. But I will tell you, I got to tell you guys, because this is serious. When I was a kid, I'm going to change subjects quickly. But when I was a kid, I lived in Washington, D.C., and I saw what I still believe was a UFO. It could never be described. I don't know what it was, but it was a group of red lights that were flying in formation, and it was bizarre. And I watched it just go slowly over my head, like I could almost touch it, but it was, by the clouds, but it looked like I could almost reach it. Could never figure out what it was. Maybe it was, maybe there's some explanation, but maybe not.
Yeah, was that back in Philly, or was that out here?
That was in Washington, D.C. That was outside of Washington in Potomac, Maryland. I lived.
Wow.
So it would be a really, it was a very populated area. It's not like, the desert where you can get away with all kinds of experiments or whatever. But
wow,
I'll never forget that, man. I never forget that thing.
You've got to, you have such a busy schedule and everything. Oh, I wanted to ask you, but you've got to come back on the show and spend some time with us. But
I will.
How are you juggling, really quick? We've got about 1 minute left.
Okay.
How are you juggling everything? What's happening with Steamroller? What's going to happen with Burning Rain?
Burning Rain's got some dates in November in the West Coast we're going to do. Steamroller is a fun thing that I do that you never know. It may turn into something original at some point, but it's pretty much just a really kick-ass jam band that we tool around and play covers. But I'm basically put family first. That's what I'm doing right now, and I've got the show in Vegas. It's at the Tropicana. Revolution Saints is gearing up, so who knows what's going to happen with that, but hopefully good things. And I love to play and write, so I'm going to be, always be doing that. And be listening to you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Doug. Have a great Thanksgiving tomorrow. Give my best to your wife and Ryder, and just have a great, safe Thanksgiving. Thank you so much.
Thanks, brother. You too. Love you, man. Talk to you later.
Love you back. Thanks, Doug.
Okay, bye.
Doug Aldrich, everybody. Wow. There you go. Putting family first, and that's the way it should be. And here's a little Doug for you. We're going to roll out. Let's right after the break, Linda Moulton Howe. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Shoot me an email, Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. I'll be back with Linda Moulton Howe right after this break. Stay with us.
Are you afraid of the dark? Don't move. Don't touch that mouse. You are listening to Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark Matter.
Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. shoot me an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. You can also follow us on Twitter right now at jchurchradio, hashtag DMRadioNet. Linda Moulton Howe is an Emmy award-winning TV producer, investigative reporter for radio and internet, and an author who goes directly to the men and women at the forefront of science and environmental breakthroughs, and to firsthand eyewitnesses of high strangeness. Howe has received 24 TV production and journalism awards for excellence. Earthfiles.com is her website. It received the 2006 W3 Silver Award for Excellence in News categories and the 2003 Web Award for the Standard of Excellence. I would like to welcome to the program our good friend, Linda Moulton Howe. Linda, happy Thanksgiving.
And happy Thanksgiving to you, Jimmy, and all of your listeners at a time where I feel that we are all going to sit down and say to each other, we are glad we have our family and our friends. But also underlying is the tension and the chaos in this country that is challenging everyone now to wonder, what is the next step for the United States of America in the wake of the revelations of Snowden and what all of us have been experiencing in the last year, well, I would say maybe a decade since 9/11, an increasing tightening that we had never experienced before in our lives, in our work. And you and I have just recently talked about what happened to me after November 20th to 21st. I was doing my normal monthly 3-hour Earth Files news broadcast on Coast to Coast AM.
Mm-hmm.
And in the first hour, I was dealing with a phenomenon that is quite peculiar, that the government has been silent about, booms, seismic events, and strange sounds. And then in the third half hour, to honor the 51st anniversary of JFK's assassination, I had on author Jim Marrs, whom I have known since the end of the 1980s and respect his work so much.
Mm-hmm.
And for people listening who might not know, Jim is the author of the groundbreaking 1989 book called Crossfire about the assassination, in which Jim adds up all of the evidence that points squarely at the CIA being the brains behind the assassination and that Oswald was a patsy.
Mm-hmm.
And that book was on the New York Times bestseller list for a very long time, and Oliver Stone, the Hollywood director, purchased the rights to the book from Jim and created the Hollywood feature film JFK, which I think stands as one of those very important Hollywood films that made everyone blink and then say, why is this film, this book, all of these witnesses, all of this evidence, all of this testimony on one side of the ledger, while the Warren Commission ignored a lot of it? And that night, on Friday to or Thursday to Friday, November 20th to 21st, when I was doing Coast, in that half-hour broadcast with Jim, he was explaining why today he even more firmly thinks, based on more increasing evidence, that Lee Harvey Oswald was a CIA patsy.
Mm-hmm.
And during that broadcast, he went to the September 2014, just a couple of months ago. This was a very important broadcast and a conference in which the Assassination Archives and Research Center organized new evidence about the JFK assassination. And it's known as the AARC. It's based in Washington, D.C. It has a physical building, a phone number, and all of that. And in a minute, I'm going to tell you a mystery that developed out of all this concerning that archive. But we were discussing this conference, and Jim was making the point that after all these years since he did Crossfire in 1989, that for the very first time in September 2014, a man who had been in the Cuban resistance, whose name is Antonio Veciana. He had alluded over the years that he knew, I'm talking about Veciana, that Veciana knew that Oswald had a CIA handler. It was not until the September 26 to 28, 2014 conference that was held back in Maryland in the Baltimore area that Veciana said for the first time without qualifying that the CIA handler that he saw with Oswald was David Atlee Phillips. Now, why is this significant? It is extremely significant given the history of David Atlee Phillips, who was at the time in 1963 November at the assassination of JFK, he was the station chief for Cuba and the Central America region for the CIA, and he is now the one who is definitely stated as being the handler with Oswald. And further, when Lee Atlee Phillips, who is now deceased, after he retired from the CIA, he did an interesting thing. He organized something called the Association of Former Intelligence Officers. And everybody who knew him said it was because he was so upset from whatever knowledge he had before retiring and what he was able to say after, having to do, and this is coming from the retired CIA agent, that Oswald was a CIA operative. This was a leak from the CIA head of the Cuba sphere. This all added up in my broadcast on November 20th to the 21st on Coast to Coast talking with my dear friend and the author of Crossfire and many other books, Jim Marrs, saying that he thinks this is the closest that we now have assembled evidence that Lee Harvey Oswald was a double agent working for the CIA. After I waited deliberately, I wanted to have my Earth files with all of the images, documents, and Jim's MP3 embedded in it so people could listen as much as they want to the interview. I wanted it to come out on Saturday, November 22nd, 2014, on the actual 51st anniversary. And that morning, I was putting it together and ran into the first unusual challenge of Saturday, November 22nd.
I want to remind everybody, Linda, that we're talking 4 days ago. I want the audience to understand what we're talking about here. This is it's very important. Okay.
I went to the website that I had in Jim's work, my work, references, paper, and was the sponsor of the September 2014 conference having to do with new evidence on the JFK assassination linking to the CIA. And when I went to the Assassination Archives and Research Center website, I got the Safari cannot find this website. So I went to the next one, and I had done a Google search for the website. And Jimmy and the audience, I went through, and you know how at the bottom of searches, it goes 1 through 10, and you might have 10 to 15 different websites per page, and you can go up to maybe 150 if they fill up all the pages.
Yep.
I went through approximately 50 links having to do with the Assassination Archives and Research on Saturday, November 22nd, and every single one was blocked. Every single one. At that point, trying to understand, well, what in the world would somebody actually have manipulated so nobody on the 51st anniversary could go in and see all of this new information? And I remember thinking that on Saturday morning, and what I did when I posted my Earth Files web story with Jim's interview and having gone to all these blocks and they never cleared, That is why at the end of my Earth Files story called 51st Anniversary of JFK's Assassination is November 22nd, 2014, and author Jim Marr says Oswald was a CIA patsy. In the area that I always put websites to help people look for themselves at the kind of research sources that I'm using when I am doing my reporting as a journalist.
Of course.
I had to put, I did a snapshot, a screenshot of the Assassination Archives and Research Center map. I had to go to a Google map because every single reference to them was blocked. And so I did and put this screenshot in there that showed that it is at 1003 K Street, Northwest, in a suite number 640, Washington, D.C., zip code 20001, phone 202-393-1921. It exists. So that's what I had to resort to do. Now, I finished putting up a story that what I wanted to do was to bring together several pieces that I have either encountered independently from Jim or that Jim and I have collaborated on concerning the JFK assassination over many years. And in my Earth Files report, one of the, I thought, would be maybe a first for many Americans was to see the photograph of Lee Harvey Oswald as a U.S. Marine, which he was. It's a 1956 photo.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in the United States Marines, and when he allegedly defected to the Soviet Union in October of 1969, and we are talking about, 59, October 59, before the assassination, November 22nd, 1963. So to give a context that this Lee Harvey Oswald, fingered by the CIA as the assassin, was a U.S. Marine, and here are the photographs. And I also brought into this article a photograph of JFK from the left side on the autopsy table, and it was the only one photo left in a website that's called JFK Lancer. Lancer was JFK's secret security code name. And JFK Lancer at one time for research purposes had, I don't know if all, but many, both black and white and color, from the JFK autopsy. You can't find them there now, only this one black and white photo. And through the stream of information that Jim and I had put out on broadcast about all of these new sort of evolving pieces coming together, including on the air, and this is very important, that Thursday to Friday, I asked Jim, in my interview that was broadcast and was in my Earth Files website, we'll call it a bringing together of many pieces about the assassination now, I said, Jim, do you think that the CIA was set up as a secret government by President Truman since 1947 to deal with and cover up unidentified aerial phenomena and extraterrestrial biological entities? That is what I've been told. Jim, I know, has been told, a few of us have been told this. And Jim said, well, there was a man I quoted in my book, An Alien Agenda, that was copyright 1997, named Bill Holden, who Jim, interviewed. He was the loadmaster for Air Force One at the time Kennedy was president. He told of the moment that they were over in Europe. This was when Kennedy made his famous Ich bin ein Berliner speech, June 26, 1963, 5 months before his assassination in Dallas, Texas, on November 22, 1963. And Jim said, apparently, they had some UFO activity there in Europe, and it made some of the headlines, and he, Bill Holden, working as this master on the plane with Kennedy, said that Kennedy, over and above so many of the other U.S. presidents, was very personable and approachable with him, Holden. And so that day on Air Force One, when Holden asked President John F. Kennedy this question about the whole issue of UFOs over Europe, then Jim quotes JFK as replying to Holden, Mr. President, and his question in the transcript was, Mr. President, what do you think about these UFOs? And he was quoting directly from Kennedy when he said, quote, I would like to tell the public about the alien situation, but my hands are tied, close quote. Now, that tying of hands is at the basis of something that I brought into my Earth Files report called the Burned Memo. It goes all the way back to 2008 and an interview I did with Bob Wood, aerospace engineer with a physics background, who had negotiated with a man called Timothy Cooper in the mid-1990s on a whole bunch of documents allegedly from Timothy Cooper's father, who had worked at the print shop at White Sands Missile Range, and that all these leaked documents concerning Majestic 12, UFOs, ETs, came through the print shop, the father, and is apparently deciding that this was such momentous content that the father would squirrel it away, and eventually the son got it and was negotiating to have these documents studied by Stanton Friedman, Bob Wood, myself in some cases, and others, and that when Bob in the mid-1990s was finalizing the negotiation with Timothy Cooper told Bob Wood, I have received a new document and it will shock you. And this is what is referred to as the Byrne Memo, because allegedly it was pulled from a fire after the death of one of the most famous CIA, James Jesus Angleton. After he died, this was supposed to have been some of James Jesus Angleton's personal documents that somebody under order post-death was supposed to burn. We do not understand how these were retrieved. And you get into this area, we all want to prove paper trails. And when it comes to UFOs, ETs, and president assassinations, there are very skilled people working to keep us from having provable paper trails. But the content in these documents are extraordinary. And we can talk about this in a minute. I just want to come back to November 20th.
Yeah, we have to set up.
22nd.
I want the audience to know where Linda is setting up. This is some breaking news, yes, and so we have to actually go through all of this to set up and go back to November 22nd. I will say this,
but I think this is fascinating. Anyway,
it's an amazing. I can't wait for the audience to hear the rest of this. The Burned Memo. You can go to earthfiles.com. And you can take a peek at that. It's right there on her.
All 9 pages.
All 9 pages are right there on her homepage. Okay, yeah.
And the one sentence in the forward to my most recent Earth Files about all of this that was related to Jim Mars in my interview was the quote, allegedly from a CIA director in that's the question, was it 1963, 2, or 1, says, quote, as you must know, Lancer, all caps, which is JFK, has made some inquiries regarding our activities which we cannot allow. And when you read the Byrne memos, it's all about the UFO ET alien situation. And I'm going to put over on our game table here with all these various pieces to tell you something about that. But I'm now going to say that all of this is in my earthfiles.com report. It's filed under Environment. The entire world can go to Earth Files on the headlines page, click on the purple link right to the 51st anniversary of JFK's assassination, and author Jim Marr says Oswald was a CIA patsy. Everybody can click on it right now and look at everything that was posted on Saturday, November 22nd, the anniversary, by 2 p.m. that day. And I left thinking that this was a step forward in terms of bringing together and weaving pieces that maybe had not been woven together in one place, adding to the CIA's frustration with John F. Kennedy over Cuba, the mob. There were a whole bunch of complaints, but the big one was that John F. Kennedy wanted to tell the American public and the world about interactions of extraterrestrials on this planet, and telling him no or resisting would have been the CIA and the very powerful and opaque MJ1. So now I leave, and I went to join family and friends to see the incredible Interstellar, and felt like I went far into the future, way away from all of this, in this incredible, way beyond a movie, life-changing event of Interstellar. And we went to dinner after with everybody completely stunned by what is in this IMAX production. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get home till about 11:30 to midnight. And the first thing I did was go to check emails, and I see several that are saying, Linda, what has happened to Earth Files? And when I clicked to go to my website, it said no server can be found.
Ooh.
And this began what went on for 24 hours of trying to understand why is my website not there, and starting with emergency urgent emails to the server company that I have been with since 1999, and this is 2014.
Right.
And they are even outside of this country. They are in Canada. They've asked that I not name them because they're trying to avoid being targeted. But they are a very competent, very reliable company with a very long track record. And even though it was now midnight and going into the next early morning of the 23rd, I did get an email back from one of their all-night staff people, and that said, Linda, we are under an attack, a denial of service attack. It is coming from around the world, hundreds of thousands of what are referred to as zombie computers, or the mindless bots that can be sicked on a particular email or website address. And as I'm watching these words come in this email, a worldwide attack by zombie computers on earthfiles.com? Why? And then, of course, it was, what have I done that could provoke anything? And the only thing that was obvious and immediate is JFK assassination and the link of ETs and Oswald being a patsy, and the evolving and emerging information that seems increasingly to be pointing to the CIA. The first thing I did was send out an email to an attorney I've known for 30-some years, an attorney who has been very helpful, and I showed him the email, the attack, the denial of service, and the sentence that the server company in Canada could not put Earth Files back online until I was in something called Cloudflare. And this is a system now that is designed to try to help protect companies and individuals from these kinds of horrible attacks that bring the servers down. As it turned out, I learned as the night went on and the morning came, and we were wrestling with this for 24 hours, that a number of computers around the world that had received a signal from somebody's switch, flick of the switch, to all aim, that's what this does. That's what a denial of service attack does. It will take 100,000 or 1 million computers all at the same time trying suddenly to connect with earthfiles.com. And what happens? The server for earthfiles.com goes down, and it was so overwhelming that the company itself, to protect itself, shut everything down. So that means it wasn't just my server that had to be taken down. It was the entire company of all these other people who had to be taken down until they did something else. And by the next 24-hour cycle, we were moving into this whole new configuration for EarthFiles, which hopefully will work. And when I finally was able to get EarthFiles back up, I want, for those who may not have gone to EarthFiles, this is from me, heartfelt about what happened. On Saturday, November 22nd, 2014, I posted to EarthFiles the report directly below, which is my JFK 51st anniversary report. And in this conjunction with the 51st anniversary of U.S. President John F. Kennedy's assassination, that includes an interview with Crossfire author Jim Marrs, I brought together information over the years that has increasingly pointed to the Central Intelligence Agency as the mastermind behind the assassination.
Right.
One of several probable motives for the murder is to maintain a policy of denial about extraterrestrial interactions with this planet that allegedly President Kennedy wanted to open up, and the CIA, along with the opaque and powerful MJ-12, did not. That 51-year-old conflict apparently is as sensitive today in this now what would be a whole half a century ago, because not long after my EarthFiles report was made public, a serious denial of service attack by thousands of zombie computers around the world were triggered by someone's keystroke to attack earthfiles.com. The attack was so great that my server company had to shut down to prevent damage to the EarthFiles server and all the company's server clients. This, what is called DOS attack, was only the third in 17 years of the server company's existence.
Wow.
It is further evidence beyond Edward Snowden's revelations that Americans are truly at the precipice of a nation that will continue to fall into a police state mentality at all government levels, or there will be a fundamental transformation from government marauding to the original goal at the founding of this nation to be of, by, and for the people. And the one person in the history of this nation that summed up the spirit with which the United States was born was the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. And this is what he said, quote, "I am a firm believer in the people. If given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts," close quote. And that, to me, is the essence of every single thing that I have been trying to do in my career and with earthfiles.com, not to do anything that was over the top in terms of credibility. And in this particular attack that has been a sort of a stun to me and to the companies that this would occur, Jim Marrs has done persistent and very credible work since he did Crossfire. And another big irony, Jim was at another conference in Texas concerning more data about the JFK assassination on this weekend And when he got back is when he found my urgent notes to him, Jim, look what happened after we did this broadcast. And Jim takes the position that we are at a very, very critical crossroad. And I'm sure, Jimmy, you feel the same way. If from here going forward for the rest of this decade and into the 21st century further, if you, I, Jim Mars, any of us who are supposed to be Americans, born and bred here, who are supposed to be protected by the Constitution of the United States, for me, for Jim, as journalists, we are supposed to be protected by the First Amendment. We are given the right to try to pursue any kind of legitimate subject. And all I know to do is that I have to keep going forward, step by step, acting, thinking, I am an American. I am protected by the Constitution and Bill of Rights.
That's right.
And that there is no other way for me, for Jim, for any of us to keep going forward until somebody stands in front of us and says, sorry, we are now a fascist police state for real.
That's right.
And this is the most critical time. It is as if we are all standing out in some kind of a big plaza of the United States. And Ferguson, Missouri, with all of those problems there, in a strange way, all of these are facets of the same issue.
They are.
Of some kind of marauding. And the one thing that I never, ever thought in my existence as an American in the United States is that I would actually begin to wonder, real, day by day, should I be afraid of the government of the United States as an American?
And as as a journalist, that's an important, And I'm going to let you. I'm listening. I'm on the edge of my seat. But I have to say one thing: journalists were supposed to be left alone. It is the First Amendment, and that is it's the very foundations, the very fabric that this country is woven with, and that's the comfort that you have always had as a journalist, as an investigative reporter, is to go out and find and distribute the truth as you want to report it, and that's your right. And the second that you feel that is, being manhandled, then you have to question everything, and I can't say any more than that. And were you in a surreal moment? Were you like, am I going nuts here? This isn't supposed to happen.
The surrealness was the depression that I felt that I have lived to a point in a nation that is so young, that was founded in the spirit of the opposite of government pincers.
Right.
And that in such a short period of time, it isn't just 9/11, the Kennedy assassination in November 22nd, 1963, 51 years ago, was, from Jim Marr's point of view, a coup d'etat.
That's right.
That the insiders that have been writing the difficult extraterrestrial, I'm going to say, policy of denial and lies, they were chartered by, and that's the interesting question in all this, did it begin with Franklin Delano Roosevelt? There really is a lot of what we think are legitimate documents concerning, where they had phrases such as celestial vehicles, and the Secretary of War there are memos with FDR about what happened in February of 1942 when we came into the war in 1941. But now I'm in February 1942 when there was that alleged attack in Los Angeles, and there was the photograph of the artillery. There are documents between the Secretary of War, Marshall, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt in which the phrases are that these celestial vehicles that we were able to shoot down two of these strange vehicles, and the documents are going back and forth between FDR and Marshall during that February to March period of time. I've done a lot of reporting about that at earthfiles.com. All of those documents that I have been able to get, along with Bob Wood and others, they're all in Earthfiles. That's one of the things that earthfiles.com is now this gigantic, like an encyclopedia archive, all in chronological order since 1999, so that every report and every word I have written in these 15 years is all there chronologically, with all of the documents, all of the photos, all of the illustrations, all of the maps. So there are now about 50,000 images in Earthfiles, and that includes these documents that we have been able to get, in some cases in archive searches, sometimes in leaks, but it does push the dialogue on extraterrestrials and retrieval operations back to FDR, but it really comes into focus during the Truman administration. And in fact, when you look at the timeline of what we think are the facts, no matter what has been pushed by the phony Project Blue Book,
right,
that 3 wedge-shaped, not disc-shaped, 3 wedge-shaped, like pieces of pie shape, came down between July 2nd and July 5th of 1947. One came down between Corona and Roswell. One came down near the Trinity site on the White Sands, what was then proving ground, now missile range.
Mm-hmm.
And another one came down 30 miles east of Alamogordo in the Mescalero Indian Reservation. Those 3 involved different security teams that came out of Los Alamos, and that there was a retrieval of bodies, perhaps 1 or 2 alive, and the technology in those vehicles, and that there was a mistake made, I believe, at the Roswell Army Airfield when that teletype sent out that message that a flying saucer or flying disc had crashed and was retrieved. Some people argue that maybe that was calculated, but I think that it probably was a mistake. And that once that got out, then the forces that Truman had brought together to help him, because of a policy of denial that had grown out of World War II between Winston Churchill and Eisenhower, this information comes from another document out of the UK,
mm-hmm.
that they knew that Royal Air Force fighters and Americans, when they got into the war, that the pilots were describing, whether they were discs, whether they were cylinders, there were different shapes, could run rings physically and literally around the Royal Air Force fighters, and there were private discussions that they were dealing with something that was not terrestrial, and that there was a pressure in World War II that affected the thinking of somebody like Churchill and Eisenhower and Truman, that they would say, we're going to put a clamp on this till we understand who they are, why they're here, what they are doing. And coming in the war time, I can sort of have sympathy and compassion for them making that decision. But then, to keep the policy of denial and lies going to this day, to keep policies and restrictions that have hurt people in their lives, perhaps, as far as I know, that the Kennedy assassination would not be the only person who had been at the end of a bullet, because they decided that this information had to be kept under wraps,
sure,
perhaps forever.
Forrestal is a good example of that.
Well, you know, that is such an interesting subject, Forrestal. He was our first Secretary of Defense. He was only in office approximately 18 months before he went out. I believe it was the 9th or 16th floor of the Bethesda Naval Hospital. And he was there because for 2 or 3 months, in what would have been, he was appointed the first Secretary of Defense on or about the same day of the creation of the Central Intelligence Agency on September 18th, 1947. And Forrestal then went into office in the fall of 47. To the fall of 48 is 1 year. And he died in May of 1949, going out a window at Bethesda Naval Hospital. I have had a discussion with somebody who knew that Forrestal family. And the interesting thing is that from inside the family, I'm not talking about politicos and I'm not talking about government people or anything, just from inside the family, that in the period of time when he began to, I guess, collapse into a kind of depressed state is maybe a fair way to say it, that he was talking to family members about unusual beings.
That's right.
And they didn't want anybody to know. And that on the one hand, when it's argued that Forrestal may have suffered a mental breakdown, nobody has ever explained why. Well, what if it is that this was the first Secretary of Defense who was trying to handle all of the policies of denial, suppression, and lies about something as fundamental as extraterrestrials interacting with this planet, perhaps bases that they discovered had been here forever, and that it did something to him, that it shocked his system, and that the main reason behind his death is because he was trying to handle what was going on with the discoveries of non-humans. And this, to me, underscores why every human deserves to know what the power greed 1% is keeping under wraps about extraterrestrials interacting with and using this planet and humans.
Yeah, and with Forrestal, the crazy thing about that, if he is there because of a mental issue, what's he doing alone? Why wasn't he monitored? Why was he able to leap from a 16th floor window? Unless he was allowed to leap or pushed from the window, because that he was well, you have MJ-12, you have that, you have all of the Department of Defense and everything else there. He was a very important individual. Why was he alone and allowed to do that? Unless Jim Marrs
has raised the question, did he really get up and go to that window on his own volition, or was somebody behind him?
Right.
I mean,
he was pushed.
It's a terrible thing that we are describing, but we laugh in nervousness because the longer that this whole evolution of lies and policy of denials has gone on to this day, and we realize that these severe cover-ups were happening during World War II and before. I think if the Cape Girardeau crash in 1941 is correct, it was in one of the leaked papers that Bob Wood got that described a 1941 retrieval of a neutronic propulsion system. That was the word. Neutronic would refer to neutrons. A neutronic propulsion device was taken in 1941 from Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Mm-hmm. And where did it go? Hand delivered to Robert Oppenheimer. And what was Robert Oppenheimer involved with?
The bomb.
This was the very beginning of the stages that led to the development of the so-called school that was the cover for what became Los Alamos Laboratory, where they developed the first atomic bomb.
That's right.
And so how thickly, tightly is extraterrestrial technology retrieved or even placed in our hands in odd ways by these beings for reasons unknown, woven into the texture of this country since 1941 on, and that these policies of denial and lies to keep us all from knowing about the existence of other life in the universe, what was the first primal reason for them to say that no one should know?
Well, you raise a good point, and the point is going through World War II with all of the agents, double agents, spying, and the networks that we had going on both sides. That practice was in place, and in 1941, and certainly with the atomic bomb project and Los Alamos and everything, and that was going on. Coming out of World War II, that machine was in place, and they didn't know that they were still World War II was too close of a memory, and they were still wrapped up in all of this secrecy. Then 1947 happens. They didn't know, mistakes were made as far as Roswell goes, and what I'm referring to is they leaked the story. And that was the mistake. And from that point forward in 1947, they did everything that they did from 1941 forward, which was silence and denial and keeping that information from the masses. And that went all the way up to Kennedy. And they were not going to let that. They were not. That's it. They had a system in place, and Kennedy wanted to step out of that box. He wanted to step out of that box on a few different things: the New World Order, puppet strings that and he wasn't the leader.
Reserve,
right? Federal Reserve, and then you had the Bay of Pigs. You had the issues that were going on with Russia, and the UFO problem. I said this the other day on Tim Weisberg's show on the East Coast on Saturday. That the UFO agenda, that was the final nail. They were like, you know what? That's it. We cannot let this. We can't let this happen. And I think that was the final straw.
Well, I can't prove this. I've only been told this, but this goes back into the early 80s after I had done a strange harvest on animal mutilations in which the perpetrators are extraterrestrial biological entities, and that I was working on that HBO project to go into UFOs, the ET factor, and a whole lot of flood of information was coming to me from so many directions in the early 80s, and one of them was from somebody who claimed that they had either seen a transcript or they had heard the wire from an MJ-12 person working for MJ-12 who was in the Oval Office with Kennedy when he had demanded that every photograph, every shred of paper, everything dealing with the extraterrestrials and their technologies and autopsy, everything would be brought to him. And that when somebody who was there in this meeting said, Mr. President, you do not have a need to know, which we know that has been said to Reagan and to others on inquiries, you do not have a need to know this. And that when Kennedy was said, Mr. President, you do not have a need to know, that he became angry and said, I am President of the United States of America, and I am your commander-in-chief, and I'm giving you an order. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Well, we all know, and I say this so much, Linda, but we all know every president that gets elected has the best of intentions, I think. They do. They have the best of intentions. We talk about Carter. We can talk about Ford. We can talk about Clinton and all of the disclosure intentions they may have had going in, and then they're a different person. That day, when they're sworn into office and they go into the Oval Office, they get a phone call from somebody, and it's not a good phone call, and they find out that they're not the boss.
Right, and this is where the rubber meets the road. What kind of a nation are we going to live in and accept? A completely, let's pretend, concocted red, blue, and white bunting that has absolutely nothing to do with the reality of this nation?
Right.
It's just all for pretend and show and keep the masses, the huddled masses, quiet, while the 1% power group continues to maraud I mean, I just think we are at a very, very vital crossroads in terms of where we're headed, whether we're going to go down that precipice or we're going to change everything. And I don't know how that's done, but I want to add something more, Jimmy, because
Sure, go ahead.
I think that the context for the fear of the MJ-12 types relates to the fact that they know that extraterrestrials, more than one, probably in conflict, have been interacting with this planet, Mars, other planets, not just in this solar system, and other arms of the galaxy, for millions of years. And that when you come down to what is true about the history of this planet, without getting into any huge detail right now about specific boxes, but just saying that we have been taught that the beginning of civilization was 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. The discovery of 12,000-year-old sophisticated Göbekli Tepe in southern Turkey, where I have been, blew that out of the water in 2010 when it was finally publicized. And Klaus Schmidt, the archaeologist, God rest him, he died this year unexpectedly. Klaus Schmidt had been working on taking dirt off of all of these pillars covering the Göbekli Tepe hill since 1994, and nobody knew about this really until about 2010. And he had done so much careful carbon dating that he was able to say to any scientist, here it is, we're in 12,000-year-old pillars and soil. Now, why is this significant? It isn't just Göbekli Tepe that is probably the work of another intelligence beyond human.
Right.
It goes to the heart of Cheops. It goes to the heart of Sacsayhuaman, Oman, and Ollantaytambo in Peru.
Yep.
It goes to that incredible place that might be in Romania and around the world. We can keep on going. And this is why in the past year, I have been doing for conferences a presentation that I call 10,000 BC Göbekli Tepe. That's 12,000 years, 10,000 BC Göbekli Tepe, and ancient stone circles. And I raised the question, is this ET terraforming? I think that that's what our government and other governments haven't wanted the world to know or understand. And yet, to me, the more we know about the beginnings of pillars not being from human hands but something else, and the relationship of humanity to other intelligences, the faster perhaps humanity can grow up past its own wars, its own conflicts. It's what Reagan said. If 7 billion humans knew that we at least are bound together in a certain evolutionary history of humanity, no matter whether we were set in motion genetically, in DNA, by extraterrestrials or not, it would set a context in which black, red, yellow, brown, and white would maybe cease to have much meaning, because the next big era would be what is the relationship of Earth and all humanity on it to this solar system, the arm of the Milky Way galaxy, other arms of the Milky Way galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy and beyond. And now we're into where interstellar begins to hit, that we are on a planet. It will have limited survival if we trash it. We have no place else to go. It is time that we were all told the truth about other life, other intelligences, interactions with this planet, because we need to get through this century in one piece without destroying crops, without destroying water, without destroying bees and birds and everything else. We need each other to get through this century. And I hope that people can go to earthfiles.com and take a look at least this cover on this DVD, which I have put together because I strongly feel we need to know what the truth is about the Greeks, about the Mesopotamians, about the Egyptians, about what does the government know about what made Göbekli Tepe and why.
Right.
We need to know the truth.
Well, real quick, this is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network, bespoke radio for the masses. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We are talking with Linda Moulton Howe. Linda, there's a very important point here that needs to be driven home. And this goes all the way back to the beginning of this conversation about the DOS attack, your work as a journalism, this great country of ours, the First Amendment. But the government, they want to dumb us down. They want to keep us dumb. That's the only, it's opium for the masses. They want to control us. But the one thing that you have enjoyed with Earth Files and that I enjoy with this program and our audience and everything else, it's called the internet. And now suddenly the one freedom that you've had guaranteed about getting information out there on Earth Files, me doing this show, the audience enjoying learning and finding out the truth, is suddenly you're denied that. And that's not right. And it's the one thing that the government can't control. And my biggest fear is that they may try to, do what they've done with everything else with the FCC. And I really hope that it doesn't happen. But it's a scary moment when here you are doing your thing, and you're only doing the right thing. You're not doing anything wrong. You're a journalist.
And I'm a credible journalist.
Right. Exactly. And the one comfort that we have, that you have, that I have, Earth Files and JimmyChurchRadio.com and the Dark Matter Radio Network and other people out there that are doing, Richard Dolan and Jim Mars and Graham Hancock and Baval and John Anthony West. It's the internet that allows us to get the truth out there. And getting a DOS attack at a moment like that, when you're talking about the CIA, what did I say to you the other day, Linda? I said, okay, here we go. You're going to come on my show. They're going to DOS us. Let's do this.
Well, you're making a very sober point, though, that we have all been living, even after the Snowden revelations, that shows that for at least 10, 20, who knows how many years, the NSA has been reaching itself into everybody's computers all the time anyway. But I think until the Edward Snowden in-your-face revelations that it was this bad, that we at least felt that as Americans with the web, that it has been sort of like a rough and tumble, the New West.
That's
and
right.
That we were all at least being able to enjoy a kind of liberty, a kind of psychological freedom on the internet that was resonant with the way I feel that this country came into being in a strange way, not trying to be too saccharine, but just that there is something about the way the web evolved, and those of us that have been in it, it has felt like, my God, this is fantastic, because no editor can stand over me and say, you can't do another UFO story or animal mutilation story, or you can't put photos, which has happened in so many cases. And that we, until now, I at least thought that we were operating to some serious and honest degree in an unedited, uncontrolled way with our audiences on the web. And now, when I am learning more and more each day that this denial of service attack, and in my case, so mammoth, that the source can never be found or proved.
Right.
It is the anonymous sniper on the planet. And as I understand it, it can be a single switch. at Fort Meade, a single switch at Langley, a single switch. There's a bunch of agencies that could be responsible, but in this case, the CIA seems the most obvious. And that they can, with a single switch, unleash these hundreds of thousands or million zombie computers with all these bots. And it is the attack of an army that is unseen, cannot be traced, and can bring down your server. And that is a whole new gauntlet to the ground.
You sound violated. Do you feel violated?
Yeah, very much so.
How has it affected you? Are your feet still on the ground? Are you still LMH?
Well, I think I have for a very long time, since I started 35 years ago, trying to get to the bottom of the animal mutilation phenomena and having law enforcement. The sheriffs, the deputies tell me the perpetrators were creatures from outer space, and my having to go through an Alice in Wonderland mirror in 79 into 80 in order to keep going. And I think that's the question you're asking. There was, and I admit it, in fall of 79, that the deeper I was getting into the animal mutilation phenomena and such high strangeness that my crew and I were experiencing everything, that I at one point wanted to walk away. I had all kinds of, I was a manager in the station, so I was director of special projects, and I could do whatever I wanted to do. And I can remember a day where I just said, I just don't want to do this. This is too eerie. This is too repulsive. This is too, and I went sort of back through the Alice in Wonderland mirror to the life of grace that I had been living before I started trying to understand what was happening with animal mutilations.
Right.
And because I was my own boss and my own manager and I had people who worked for me, I decided that I'm not doing this. And I can remember going back, driving to the station with this sense of complete and total relief. Oh, I don't have to do this. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And
you were right there. You were right there, huh? You were at that point.
Yes. Absolutely.
Wow.
And
wow.
And what I'm going to tell you is, to me, one of the fundamental lessons of life. I personally think that sometimes the idea that we have free will is an illusion, and that in Interstellar, this incredible event that takes us into the future and experiences different times, they also are dealing with this same issue. Because we are in a universe, in a cosmos, in which entanglement happens in photons, because every photon theoretically is connected to every other photon in this universe. That is a hard concept, but it is mathematically the ground upon which entanglement is experimented with. And if you hold that in your mind, that every photon in this 13.8 or 9 billion year universe they're all connected through all time in some unfathomable way, and you come to me approaching my door at Channel 7, putting my key in the lock. It's as if it happened a second ago. It is so clear to my mind. Mm-hmm. And as I'm turning the key, I hear the phone ringing. And I open up my office door, and I pick up that phone. And 3 phone calls later that morning, I was more involved, pulled in to getting the answers and getting to the bottom of the animal mutilation mystery than I had been the month or so before. Can I tell you exactly what happened in those 3 phone calls? Today I can't. But what I'm saying is I remember how that transition at the door with the key and that other moments happen like this, when I was, if you can imagine working 18-hour days, sleep is just a frustrating interruption that you know that you have to do in order to keep going. And that for 9 straight months, I never stopped. I'm married. I have a child, a husband. I told him everything I was getting into and that it could be dangerous. In the beginning, I thought maybe it was some sort of a government experiment with nerve agents like in the Doug White Sheep thing. And then as I got into it and realized it's worldwide, and law enforcement is saying it's extraterrestrial creatures, and it was getting deeper. And my family supported my continuing to do this at such an intense rate. Well, when you go into something that deeply, when you try to walk away, and it is as if the universe itself picks you up and says, no.
Right.
You can't, your whoop, what do they call it? The warp and the woof, that if you look and think of life, every single one, 7 billion looms and counting, and each loom, there are the cross strings and the vertical strings, and we may be born with the blue outline of the pattern on that warp and that woof. And all we can do, perhaps, is to add the colors and the density. But what happened to me in the process of going through that door, trying to get to the bottom of animal mutilations, like every medical and environment and science story that I had done up to that point in 79, and I had done an awful lot. And then 79 to 2014, that it is as if I had no option.
No choice.
In this life.
Yeah, no choice. Free will definitely was off the table.
And how much of life fits into the recycling of souls, and that reincarnation is a machinery of the universe, and that if we knew the truth, souls come into matter to do something specific, leave matter to return, and that this huge, vast cycling, just like the entangled photons, is going on, and that if we understood it, and there's this incredible scene in Interstellar where they're trying to deal from the perspective of superstring theory, that the brain, the fifth dimensional brain, is what the fourth, third, second, and first are embedded in. And there is this remarkable scene where they're trying to deal with what the old wise minds of the ages would have said, the alpha to the omega, the mind that has the presence of the past, the present, and the future simultaneous. That from that perspective, time is an illusion. And where that used to always confuse me, I am beginning to understand it a little better. It is almost as if, and I'm sure, Jimmy, you've had moments like that you feel like life is catching up to where you've already been.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. It sounds like, I haven't seen Interstellar yet. We're going to go see it this weekend. You were just talking about 18-hour days. You know my life.
Yes.
And we're finally going to get it out of the way. But Interstellar, for all of my friends and family that have seen it, they all seem to be affected the same way. This is a movie with a message, kind of like 2001.
There is nothing comparable to it except 48 years ago, I believe it was, the debut of 2001. And I think when it came out, I either was just in Stanford or after, I can't quite remember. It was 60-something because I graduated from Stanford in my master's degree in 68.
Right.
And I was in New York City. And I remember that for the very first week opening of 2001. And so I was in a New York City big theater, crowded. And when the credits began to roll on 2001, the entire New York City audience, you know what I mean when I say New York City, they've been around and they've seen a lot of movies.
Right.
They jumped screaming, myself included. People were screaming. This was an event. It was a life-changing event, Stanley Kubrick's 2001. And I think it's 48 years ago. Now, so between that, and I got to see, along with that audience and a few other audiences, the total uncut. I think it was 3 hours and 20 minutes. It was hugely long, broke every mold then. And so I got to see in that first week that New York screening without anything cut. And then there were critics who said it was way too long, and Kubrick went in and cut out, I think, 30, 35 minutes, something. I don't remember the exact time. And so what everybody else has seen of 2001 since that first week or so has always been the cut version.
That's right.
And now, 2014, what has happened with this Interstellar is taking the 2001 event, and I'm telling you, this is to a power of 10 more. And to underscore, I was in a theater, there were 7 of us who went that Saturday, excuse me, after I had put the Earth Files up, 7 of us went to see Interstellar in IMAX. And I'm going to tell you what happened and then ask you if you've ever experienced this. The music and the last scene come at you really without preparation. And the credits begin to roll. And it was an IMAX theater here in Albuquerque, and it had maybe, 400 and some people in it. I'm not really sure, but a lot. It was packed. The credits are rolling. There is not a word, no feet are moving, no one is standing up. In all of my life, I have never been in a theater with that many human beings at the end of something that clearly was like a life-changing event that took place in the 3 hours. It's nearly 3 hours long, but worth every microsecond. And when you realize that, in contrast, 48 years ago, I had the screaming ovation, people yelling and throwing things in that theater in New York at 2001. And in 2014, the audience was slammed.
Stunned.
And they did not move. And I mean, my brother grabbed a hold of my arm, and we're brother and sister, and all we have to do is look at each other's eyes. And one of my friends came and grabbed a hold of my arm, and she said, "Oh my God, I feel like I've been hit with a Mack truck." And it isn't pain.
Right.
When something tumbles in you like a whole bunch of pieces at once, and that you have been exposed to what something in your very soul knows relates to some kind of fundamental truth that we have been exposed to now through this incredible Interstellar, but we have not been taught any of it as a human species on the planet. And there is the sad underbelly. It's in the movie. It's in our lives now in this United States of America. The core of the film, what happens when humans trash a planet and they have no other planet to go to. And that at the core of all of it, and the resonance, and why I think that people are feeling like they've almost been hit with a Mack truck, is that there is something in us as an audience that we know that a lot of things are fundamentally off.
Right.
And how much of this century is going to look like where Interstellar begins.
Oh, man. You built it up pretty good.
It's mind-blowing.
I know. I've heard it so much. And for people to compare, look, 2001 stands on its own. We know that. That's it. That's it. There's no discussion there. And to put Interstellar, and you said it, we've waited 48 years. We've had 48 years of gap in between.
Right.
Hollywood has had many opportunities to do something like Interstellar or like 2001 again. And here we have Interstellar. It's there in front. And for people that I respect to compare Interstellar to 2001, you're pulling at my emotions right there. I mean, that's a big mountain to climb, but it seems that is the vote. It's right there and then some. And I respect you, Linda, and for you to say that, I'm watching Twitter. That's it. I'm going to go see Interstellar this weekend. It's just flicking by.
Jimmy, I would be stunned myself if you, in your program, after you have seen Interstellar, are not using as the benchmark the historic 2001, but this has broken the mold in spades.
Really?
Yes.
Linda, that's, like I said, you're pulling at my emotions. It's such a high benchmark, but it's what everybody is saying. And I can't wait. And
I'll tell you, there have been some papers just on the sheer black hole side.
Mm-hmm.
Kip Thorne, he is a physicist. A book. I remember getting it, and it's called Black Holes and Time Warps.
Yep.
And I got that when that book came out, which must be about 30 years ago. And I struggled trying to read through it. It's not easy to read if you're not a physicist and you can do equations. But this is the same Kip Thorne that was the scientific advisor on this film. And even though there are pieces and areas that probably anybody and everybody could quibble about things and interpretations, the most interesting thing is that there have been some scientists have been commenting that this is a film that for the very first time is depicting a possible reality, a characteristic about what black holes, small or large, or their interaction with, let's say, our solar system, how it might present itself. And there is a line in the film that if you're listening, you will get it. And then I don't want to spoil anybody. It's just say that black hole physics is involved in this film, and it is the first time that they've literally tried to take Kip Thorne and others' work on black holes, Hawking and so forth, and depict something in this film that may actually have a reality in what we'll call the three-dimensional universe, matter world that we're in, and that there are so many complex quantum physics and superstring theory ideas about other dimensions from 11 down to 5 being like Jello, in which 4, 3, 2, and 1 are encased. And if people go into the theater with just some kind of glancing education about the other dimensions, superstring theory, and black holes, then you will begin to see that this film is doing something that no other presentation has ever done.
Sounds like Hollywood just stayed out of the way.
Well, they let a real black hole time line physicist help them with the script and guide the script, and that is important. And what are we going to be heading toward for the rest of the century. I just did an amazing interview today that I'll be working with on some broadcasts and Earth Files upcoming about the possible upcoming magnetic north-south pole flip, maybe within this century. And this brand new data has come from 3 extraordinary, they're called swarm. They're swarm satellites. And the 3 work together in a triangular pattern, and they are under the management of the European Space Agency. And they've only been up for a year or two, but the data that has been coming back is already lifting eyes everywhere in the geophysical community about the fact that this is hard to grasp, that the magnetic field of our planet has been weakening 10 times faster than ever thought or calculated before January to June 2014. Now it's because they have real data. And why is this so significant? The scientist I interviewed has been involved in analyzing magnetic fields that have been, which are sort of imprinted in ash in Italy.
Interesting.
And it boils down to that they can go back. The last magnetic pole shift on the planet was 876,000 years ago.
Right.
And that there have been hundreds of these where the north and the south poles change their magnetic field polarity that have happened. And since about 65 million years ago, at the end of the dinosaurs, this has happened maybe every 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 sort of years.
Right.
Not on a regular metronome, but right now, this sudden measured 10 times the magnetic field of the Earth is weakened 10 times faster than they thought. It goes to this bottom line. Out of the ash and the stones that they have studied, in addition to the swarm information, is that the last time that the north magnetic pole and the south changed, they are now discovering there was about 100 to 200 years of erratic pendulum-like swinging of the Earth's magnetic field before the flip kicked in.
That's right.
And that in that period, it collapsed down to maybe near zero and then strengthened and weakened and strengthened and weakened. What would that do to Earth life that is dependent upon magnetic fields, such as birds in the sky and marine animals, and that literally, quite physically, birds could fall out of the sky if there is this sudden weakening? Now, what they did not realize until recently is that the data seems to be showing that at least in the last pole flip, it all happened in 100 years, approximately. And right now, we have got the North Pole is being pulled to Siberia because of upwelling magma. That's been going on for 50 years. But the areas where there have been the greatest changes on the planet have been from Siberia into the Indian Ocean. And we're talking about huge changes in the magnetic field. And I asked this particular scientist, does that mean that the new South Pole is going to be in Siberia and the new North Pole is going to be in the Indian Ocean? And he said, it's not clear. That what could happen is something that no one is going to know until the Earth and its core the magnetic dominant, or the dynamo that creates our magnetic fields is from the core of the Earth.
That's right.
And it is changing. It is definitely changing. And that what happens when this pole, and I want people to understand, if these words are so hard, it isn't like the Earth flips. It's a magnetic field change that the north magnetic field switches with the magnetic polarity to the south, which we think of as the Antarctic.
Right.
And in fact, there was a scientific paper that began, imagine that you're in an airplane flying to Antarctica and it is now the North Pole. That's what would happen. That is what we're talking about, and that it is completely unknown exactly what the consequences of this will be on Earth life, including Homo sapiens sapien, as these swings in weakening and strengthening keep going on until there actually is the pole shift. But it might, not definite, but it might happen within 100 years.
This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, Bespoke Radio for the Masses. We are speaking with Linda Moulton Howe. I have to ask, when I envision the pole going through the Indian Ocean, are we talking about then the pole then uprights itself? Does the Earth shift? In other words, is North America now going to be the new North Pole? Is that what's going to happen? Does the Earth actually change its orientation too as well?
No. It's just a magnetic field. How to explain this?
Well, you understand what I'm saying. We're not going to change like 25 degrees or something. And
No. The Earth itself is not moving. That it has nothing to do with the big, massive Earth switching anything physically.
Okay.
It still is pointing in the same directions. No, it is a magnetic fields are generated by the motion of the predominantly iron core
right
at the center of the Earth that is turning within the outer core, and they are all largely iron. And as the center core spins around, and there is an outer core, above that is the mantle where what would become lava in a volcano out at the surface. And that, depending upon the speed and the shape of the core, is my understanding, that would affect perhaps what happens with these magnetic field changes. But I learned something today, that currently, 2014, that geophysicists really do not understand what brings about these magnetic field changes.
Right.
They don't really understand what the changes at the core, how they exactly relate. There are, I think in some ways, it's fair to say that there are more mysteries about the Earth below our feet, especially down into the mantle and the core, than there are now about the moon, that we know more about other bodies than we do about what is in the core of this planet, because it is not something that we can go in and examine, and yet it has this huge impact on what is happening at the surface. And here are a couple of other very important papers that have come out this year. One that was a couple of months ago from New Mexico Institute of Technology, and it was a surprise to the scientists who went into this. They put something like 2,700 measuring stations around looking at tectonic plate movement on the Earth now. And the tectonic plates are like the Indian plate and the North American plate and these various plates of land that are surrounded by all the water bodies on this planet. And the question was, if the Earth is 4.5 or 4.6 billion years old in a solar system with a sun of that age, the expectation is that volcanic, plate tectonic, all of it would be settling down into some sort of middle age and becoming less active. And instead, the headline was, scientists have found that the tectonic plate motion on this planet is equivalent to what it was 2 billion years ago.
Excuse me? Really?
Yeah, yes. And at Earth Files, on my headlines page, if you scroll down, I have a lot of different headlines and in-depth reports. You will find the reference and the link to this New Mexico Institute of Technology report, and that this combined with discovery that there are hydrogen and oxygen in molecular state that could mean that there is the equivalent of a huge amount of water in the magma that they didn't know was there before, meaning it's quite fluid. And that if you add up, the core is changing, the magnetic fields are fluctuating, the plate tectonics are what they were 2 billion years ago. That means they're very active, that we are on a planet that is dynamic, that is changing under our feet and around us, and that a question that hangs out there, if it is this active, and we are looking into this century of so many problems and so many changes, what if suddenly the volcanoes became active again? What would modern-day governments do if the skies filled with ash? And that would be the challenge of an extinction question.
Yeah, that's sobering.
So we are at a time where politically, economically, physically, geophysically, astronomically, if you said there's one thing between 2014 and going forward, it's not at all routine. It's as if we are going to now be moving in a century where everything is constantly changing and perhaps unpredictable, and why I feel even more strongly, every human deserves the same knowledge that the 1% has about other intelligences in this universe.
We'll never stop rolling that rock uphill. You said that we could take some phone calls tonight. You want to take some phone calls and have some fun? All right. Yeah. Let's take our first one. We've got some lined up here. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Say hi to Linda Moulton Howe. Who's calling?
Hi, Linda. This is Michael McMillan. How are you doing today?
Hi.
It's Michael. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing fantastic. What you're talking about right now is the changing of the Earth's polarity was something that I learned about in geology in high school, and I was wondering if this was the same type of phenomenon they were talking about. They called it the wobble. They said that it happened every 25,000 years, and it was when the North Star changed from being Polaris to being Vega. It would be where the Earth's axis on its tilt would kind of tilt the other direction. And this would happen when the magnetic fields, there are maps of these that you can see in the northern and southern hemisphere, and you can see where large areas has switched from being north to south on either side of the hemisphere, and ships encountered this when they would be heading south, and their instruments would suddenly flip over. And is this the same type of phenomenon, what they were describing as the wobble?
Thank you so much, Michael.
I think that what you're defining is if you think in school when you've got the Earth and it's on one of those half bars and it's got the poles, metal, coming out of the north and the south, and the teacher would have the instrument move around so you could see why there are seasons in relationship to the sun being a light bulb, and you see the earth going around the sun. But there is the wobble, this cycle of approximately 26,000 years. I think it's referred to as something like an axial precession, and it relates to that the earth, if it were completely vertical, then it would have a different relationship to its motion around the sun. It's tilted, and in that tilt, there's a kind of a wobble. Think of a top. The top, if you spin a top on a table, when it gets to a certain point, it starts to wobble, and that wobbling is this tilt of our earth, or wobbling because the earth is tilted.
Mm-hmm.
That is completely different from the magnetic field generated at the core of the earth that creates the magnetic field lines and makes a north and a south, a positive and negative. You think of a magnet. That's what we're dealing with in our planet when we're talking about magnetic fields. So the magnetic fields of the earth are different from the huge physical body of the earth moving around the sun, and that it's on an angle, and that angle can wobble. Am I being clear?
Yeah, and you know what's funny about that? This is how my brain works, Linda. What are the odds that all of that together puts us here? that's the because without the precession and without the tilt, without our distance from the sun that allows water not to evaporate or to freeze, and the moon sitting out there, and then of course Jupiter and Saturn grabbing all of that puts us here. That's the crazy part. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Say hi to Linda Moulton Howe. Who's calling?
Hi, Linda. Hi, Jimmy. This is Billy.
Hi, Billy.
I was listening. I was listening earlier to the conversation about something you said, and then I love to connect dots, and I think I found an interesting dot for you guys. What was the name of the first crash in 1941?
Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and it's Girardeau. Cape Girardeau.
Okay. And you stated that it somewhat influenced Oppenheimer, or at least that's the allegation, correct?
Yeah, you can. I know you're asking Linda. Okay, I jumped in. Linda, I'm so sorry I'm being so rude. The 1941 case is something that you can dig a little deep and go out. It's something that isn't spoken about. You know, everybody knows about Roswell. Everybody knows about Kenneth Arnold. 1941, Cape Girardeau. That was an actual recovery of a craft, and it's documented, and you can go out and do that research. Yeah, it's a fascinating case.
If you go if you guys go to my news website, earthfiles.com, and in the upper left under quick search, just type in Cape Girardeau, and I'm doing it myself as I speak.
So am I.
And there, a lot of things come up, but specifically under the Leonard Stringfield and in the Majestic 12 documents, which gets later on, and Cape Girardeau and Charlotte Mann's 1991. Here I'm going to all the way back to 2002, and my Earth Files is ordered in a chronological way. So, and I'm just finding that because of this denial of service, that the computer now in my radio studio needs to be changed, all the codes to match my computer upstairs. I just realized that. But I can tell you anyway, there is a document, the Majestic white document, and a summary document that is in the Majestic 12 Documents website, and it's much in Earth Files, that goes back to what may have been December 1941 or the spring. Charlotte Mann was the granddaughter of a reverend. I've talked with her at great length. And her grandfather, according to the family, was called out in the middle of the night by a military presence to have the reverend give last rites over bodies of extraterrestrials at a crash site. The grandfather went back and told the family, and allegedly somebody gave him a photo, somehow that he had a photo of one of the bodies, showed it to the family. They all discussed it, and he told them that the military people at the site had told him not to talk about it, but that he had given last rites, and they were trying to somehow have civilized relationships or to treat them in such a way, and that's why they called him out to do this. And in this document that goes into the Cape Girardeau crash, that most people have not heard about, it discusses specifically in a paragraph how there was a high neutron count at the site. There's a lot of things about surprising things that they found and measured, and that one of the, it's called neutronic, and that would fit in with neutronic propulsion device, and that it was given to Robert Oppenheimer, and we all know what he was doing in the 40s. So that was the most surprising statement about what happened in Cape Girardeau, that they got a technology from an extraterrestrial craft and handed it over to Oppenheimer, who was working on the development of the atomic bomb. And the Cape Girardeau shoot through Charlotte Mann, the granddaughter of the grandfather, was in many ways one of the few cases where there was a living human being who has talked about her grandfather's involvement, and that she's removed. She wasn't there at the site, didn't see the beings, but she was part of a family in which the Reverend talked about it.
So the dot that I wanted to connect, now that we've established that there is an Oppenheimer connection, let's look at the fact that the acquisition of this neutron machine influenced the development of the nuclear bomb. And now let's go back to Robert Saleh and a motivation as to why the extraterrestrials would be concerned about our further development of that technology in the first place, because they may feel responsible for having introduced it to us in the first place.
Well, I understand. Yes, I understand what you're asking, but you can also take that coin and flip it to another side, which is slightly more insidious. Was E equals MC squared provoked in Einstein's mind to set us off on a particular physics path as humans, insidiously because it was dangerous?
Yeah, that's a. Hey, Billy, thank you for the question. Do you have anything else for Linda?
No, it was just that connection between Oppenheimer and Robert Saleh.
Yeah.
That was my main dot, the main dot I wanted to connect. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
I'm going to keep connecting it right now. Thank you, Billy.
Thank you.
He raises a really, really, really good point, and one of them for me is we haven't, when we talk about the knowledge being there, possibly ET, which I think it is, and we used the bomb in 1945, but we haven't used it since. We've tested, but we haven't used it on each other, and it seems like there's been some.
That we used the atomic bomb, dropped 2 of them on Japan.
But since then, no. You know, it seems like we've had some divine intervention since then. Doesn't it feel that way to you?
Well, here's a whole other subset that I've been exposed to, and Jim has, and a bunch of us, and we can't prove, and it is that extraterrestrials themselves, who are in conflict with other extraterrestrials,
right,
have done everything they could to interrupt, interfere, and shut down Malmstrom, Minot, and so forth in order to keep the Earth from going into nuclear war. And this intrigues me profoundly, because if there is ongoing conflict between extraterrestrial intelligences and that some are trying to help us, like Prometheus from the Greek mythology, or Enlil Enki, that Enki championed humans and Enlil wanted to eradicate us. Prometheus championed humans, and Zeus and others wanted to eradicate us. That over and over there is this cycle of argument about whether humanity should be allowed to live or it should be completely erased.
That's right.
So if there is conflict, over what is allowable to do with life, and if that document that I was shown at Kurland Air Force Base on April 9, 1983, and had the sentence in it that said, extraterrestrial biological entities manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapien, and it used just the two Latin Homo sapien. We, in the current modern species of a standing up primate, are Homo sapien sapien. Going back to Africa and Lucy, the first standing up Homo erectus primates, and evolving through the last approximately 1.8 to 9 million years, there have been a bunch of different models of standing up primates, and we are the latest. And we replaced Neanderthalensis before us, and on it goes. If the first standing up primate was put into being by extraterrestrials, perhaps to create some sort of a smarter workforce on Earth. That's what Zecharia Sitchin's work was all about concerning the Anunnaki and Enlil and Enki, that they were extraterrestrials, that the Mesopotamian Anunnaki were pure blood extraterrestrials, and they mixed and matched genes to create a whole bunch of different life forms, including evolving primates. Then, if there was conflict between that group, Enlil Enki, and that there had been conflict between others, what is the state of that conflict in 2014? And what is the relationship between us, Cro-Magnon, Homo sapien sapien, and a variety of different extraterrestrials with different agendas? And if there are geopolitical territorial conflicts among different extraterrestrial groups, is it about what is allowable to do with life? And is somebody trying to draw the line and say, you're going to stop cloning, you're going to stop hybridizing, you're going to stop creating life that is sentient, and then deciding that you can eliminate it and erase it? If there have been cycles of those kinds of fights over cloning, hybrids, prime intelligences, from solar system to solar system, it might explain the bizarreness of this planet's history and why humanity seems to be so estranged, oddly, from itself and this planet.
Yeah. You hit the nail right. How did you get so smart? How did you get so smart, young lady? Hi.
I'm just curious, and I like to learn.
Oh, Linda, say hi to Dino. Dino, say hi to Linda.
Hi, Dino.
Linda, it must have something to do with the farm. There's so many interesting minds and lives that have come out of Stanford at the farm.
Yeah, that was a great place to go to school.
I wish I could have gone. But at any rate, so many things. Thank you. You're one of the foundations, I believe, of the whole exopolitical movement that we're trying to get some disclosure on. But could I take you back a bit? I never got to ask you this. You might remember back, I think it was 1980, when you were doing a lot of the mutilation research. Do you remember being in a town in Northern California near Oroville, Chico area, and interviewing ranchers up there?
Oh, gosh. In the mutilation work, it was concentrated in Wyoming, Colorado, Nebraska, Utah, Nevada, New Mexico. That was most of the areas where I personally, physically went. And then later on, I was in England where they were having mutilations, and I was able to work with a farmer in England that was having mutilations of 6 calves. California and all the rest of it, I know that I have been in close touch with ranchers there, and that up in eastern California, there were a series of mutilations that kept happening, and I was in contact with ranchers and getting photographs and all of that. And then Jean Bilodeau in Cedarville, California, that I just had on Coast on the 20th, she has been working in the Cedarville, California area, Surprise Valley, most of her career, at least 30-some years. And she also investigated animal mutilations. And I was with her.
The reason I asked you, Linda, is I thought you might have interviewed my father, who used to have a ranch up there in Northern California, and had he said a woman that didn't. Go ahead.
What was his name?
I kind of keep kind of incognito here. This would have been back about 1980. It was on a place called Lone Tree Road outside of Oroville. Apparently there was a cow. My father said some woman interviewed him, and this was before I had the interest in the extra political stuff, but he had mentioned, and this is how you might remember him, that he had been ranching for many years all over the West, and that he thought that the cheek marks and the genitals and all the stuff had been perhaps chewed away by a coyote or something with the front teeth. And at the time, I knew enough to say, no, I think it's done with lasers. But if you were alive today, I think seeing your great research, and again, if you could share with our listeners who may not know what you believe the purpose of this mutilation and taking of organs is.
Thank you so much, Dino.
Yeah, thank you. And I discussed in my first book, An Alien Harvest, and I'm very happy to report that I have a brand new second edition out that's bigger and updated on every page, and it's 480 pages, and it is as if my skin, my blood, my everything, my tears are in this book, because when you take everything that I have put in that book, and you are seeing forensic evidence, you are seeing interviews with ranchers, with law enforcement, with citizens. There's a lot in An Alien Harvest. And then you add to all of that I was exposed to and investigating, the fact that I had a veterinarian down in Arkansas who, from A Strange Harvest, my television program was broadcast May 25th, 1980. It was a 90-minute special on the CBS station in Denver. And then in that year of 1980, in the summer, there was a report that came out from the Bentonville Sheriff's Office in Arkansas that they had done a star scope, buying a cow, putting it out at night, seeing what predators would do. Look, everybody, it's predator. It's foxes and crows. And this went out into newspapers and on the television, and I knew then that it could not be possibly true because of everything I had exposed and reported. But it was as if it were designed by counterintelligence to swamp the truth yet again, just like the balloons, weather balloons in Roswell. So out comes a strange harvest with real facts, and then comes this calculated Bentonville Sheriff's Office saying that it's predator and here's a starscope. Now, why I want you to hold that in all of your listeners' minds while I tell you that 25 years later, it would have been actually probably around 2002 or 3. The phone rang in my office in Philadelphia where I was then. And it was a man who said, Linda, my name is Dr. And I've still kept my promise not to reveal his name. He said, I was the veterinarian in the Bentonville area of Arkansas, and I have wanted to tell you all of these years that your book, your television show, I know how true you have reported the facts, and that I have wanted to tell you, and I'm now retired and I have nothing to lose, that the week that the Benton County Sheriff's Office put out that so-called videotape of foxes and crows leaving excisions on a cow, he said, I was secretly and quietly doing necropsies on mutilated animals, opening them up, finding internal organs that were missing. He specifically went into bladders were missing, the various organs. I don't think he had a heart. I've had talk with people, but there were various organs with no excisions on the abdomen of the body. And this to me meant everything. The vet knew the truth. Veterinarians have known the truth. They have done necropsies on animals in which they did not want to stand up in front of any press conference anywhere and say, there is no medical way to have done this. You can't remove the heart from inside of an animal like a grown cow and not have any surgery excision anywhere on the chest, anywhere on the body. And yet, inside of these animals, that veterinarian who called me had documented for the same sheriff's office that was putting out a policy of lie,
disinfo,
the truth.
Right.
And this shows to anybody now who's listening how calculated the counterintelligence efforts are and have been and are today. But the truth, the facts are there in An Alien Harvest, in the documentary A Strange Harvest, in my books, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volumes 1 and 2, in Jim Marr's work. There are people who really have been getting leaks, and they have been reporting. And finally, to put an exclamation point on the sort of the pressure of fact that can get out, and that is through the people who have been in the human abduction syndrome. We're dealing with intelligences that appear to have mixed agendas, and part of what they do is they have taken humans at various times for various reasons.
Right. And that's that's such a taboo subject too. When you're getting close to the thought of human mutilation too, as well, and it's people don't want to hear.
I don't know of a single case in which there's been forensic fact, and this is important that you brought that up. The so-called case from Brazil,
right,
that was presented by A.J. Gavard in, I believe it was Laughlin, Nevada, in around 91 or 92. I got a phone call from somebody who said, do you know anything about this Brazil case? And this man at this conference is selling photographs of this man with black rings around excisions that are bloodless on his body. And I said, no, I have not heard of this. Can you send me the photos? And he did. I knew a medical doctor. I did not front load anything. I just called up the medical doctor and said, could I just come over for a few minutes and show you some photographs? All I want is your first medical reaction. And I was able to, because I knew this doctor, I was able to go there, and he knew of my work. And I laid the 2 or 3 photographs down, and the immediate word from him was, oh, I saw a lot of this in Vietnam. And I said, what did you see in Vietnam? He said, that's what Agent Orange does to human skin. And he went and showed where there were the black rings around where the scrotum had been taken, and around the mouth, and these various places on this male body in Brazil. And he said, I don't know why anybody would kill somebody this way, but he said that's what it looks like. So nothing has been proved with an autopsy report in that Brazilian case. Nothing was ever done of any kind of a forensic nature except to pass around these photos and call it a human mutilation by extraterrestrials when nobody anywhere has established that connection. So now, are there any cases of UFOs, beams, extraterrestrials, anything picking up humans and returning them where they have bloodless excisions like the animals? There are 2 or 3 cases, Canada, Pennsylvania, Missouri, that I personally have been exposed to maybe something like that occurring, compared to thousands of animals in both hemispheres around the world. Now, I'm not trying to defend extraterrestrials or damn extraterrestrials. That's the problem. We are being kept in the dark, and we need to know the truth, because in the last approximate 5 years, I would say there is an increasing amount of information that comes through human abductees as well, that there is a problem, a serious medical, biological problem with at least one of the intelligences that may be interacting with Earth. If we understood all of the truth, if we understood all of the facts about the geopolitical territorial conflicts, about what's allowable to do with life, if we understood that perhaps that the animal mutilations have been going on, going back all the way to the so-called sacrifices of the Minoan Cretes and the Aztecs and the Mayans, we might really know that those sacrifices were actually still in the same program being used for extraterrestrial reasons of their survival. That underlying some of what is happening might be that if we knew the truth, we might feel compassion. And there was a refreshing interview that I had with Alex Peterson. He is a rancher in Hagler, Nebraska. He's had 6 of his prize Angus pregnant cows mutilated in 12 months. And we have been able to talk together about many, many details. And in one of my recent interviews with him about the 6th mutilation, he said, Linda, if it's extraterrestrial, then why can't we have a trade route?
Right.
They want my Angus, then give me something that I can trade with or sell on Earth, and you can have my Angus cows.
Take 12.
That's what
he
raises them to sell for turn into meat here on Earth. And when I'm hearing a down-to-earth, intelligent rancher in Hagler, Nebraska say, well, they don't have to come and sneak my animals in the night. They can we can do something here that's straightforward. He said, I'm not going to panic. I just want to be treated fairly.
Interesting.
I think that is the mantra that this planet could have.
That's exactly right. Well, and why would the man see? This is the thing, Linda, and we wouldn't freak out. We wouldn't. You're talking about a cattle rancher. It's just a guy like the rest of us. He's not going to freak out. He's cool with it. You know what? This whole thing, we can't talk about it because there'll be panic in the streets. There'll be mayhem. There'll be anarchy. You know, so we are alone. We are alone. They're not there. Is completely wrong, and it's completely BS. I think it would be the exact opposite. I think the population of the earth, any religion, anything would just go, whew, all right, we got that out of the way. Let's move on.
And the Catholic world for, 10, 12 years now, has periodically been releasing very official statements that finding other life in the universe just simply enhances the glory of the Godhead in the divine field, and that there is no contradiction with the Catholic perspective. That seems like a mature and wise approach, and that I think almost everybody on the planet could agree with that.
I've had such a great time tonight. You know what? I've had this call on hold for 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Can we take one more? Yeah, and I know it's getting late for you, but let's take one more. Hold on. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. I'm sorry to keep you on hold for so long. Who's calling?
This is Mike from Indiana.
Hi, Mike from Indiana. Say hi to Linda Moulton Howe. How are you tonight?
Hi, Mike.
I'm fantastic. Honored to talk to both of you. Jimmy, keep on keeping on. And Linda, I've been listening to you since the Dreamland days back in the 90s.
Oh, yeah, with Art.
I have a question. What is up with the crop circles? We haven't really heard much or seen much about them for about 20 years, it seems. And are there new ones popping up? And what's going on with them? I will take my answer off the air. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike.
I've been to England, I think, 8 or 9 times since 1992. 92 was the first crop formation that I got into personally. And it was a life-changing experience like Interstellar was in this regard, that I went because I was provoked from afar and seeing on 20/20 and 60 Minutes all of the programs about crop formations, and mainstream media were covering the amazing crop formation phenomena that in the year 1990 and 91, they were photographed from the air in 23 countries around the world. People forget this. The formations were in rice paddies in Japan. They were all over the planet. And it was being talked about in television news. And in the summer of 1992, I and 6 or 7 others went on, it was a long path. It was about 3/4 of a mile to get from a parking lot to what is called Milk Hill. And there was a big formation of circles down in this crop. And we were all new to it, and it was a beautiful day, and it was sort of effervescent, and we were joyous, and we started running down the hill, sort of, and we went to the tram line, which was so we wouldn't trample any crops. And the 6 or 7 of us now in a line, I just happened to be at the head of the line, so to speak, so I went down further. This was a 430-foot long pattern, so that's bigger than a football field laid out in this crop. And where I was and everybody else, we were all at different positions. And I remember having my camera hanging around my neck, a 35 millimeter, and my first thought was, I can't wait to get in here to take photos, that kind of feeling.
Right.
And was taking my hands and starting to pull my camera up as I'm walking toward the edge. And suddenly and very literally, it felt like I hit Jell-O.
What?
Yes, it was palpable. It's something that was on the exterior of the pattern. And this has happened to me more times since. This is the first time.
Did you have problems? Did you have problems moving? Was it extra effort?
I think it's an electrostatic field, and I think that some of us are more sensitive than others, and to me, it felt just like a wall of Jell-O, and it stopped me in my tracks right at the perimeter of the pattern. And I was so stunned, and everybody else is far away, so it isn't like I have somebody around to talk and ask.
Right.
So I pulled my camera up, and I started taking photographs of what I could see, which was absolutely mind-blowing. And the pattern, we're talking about something that looked just like water inside of this big circle. And eventually, I just pushed forward, and I got on the inside, and I felt like that I should tiptoe on my toes, that I should not damage anything. I got down on my knees. I started lifting up one surface layer, and I would find another one underneath that was going 90 degrees, another one under that, 7 layers deep, going in different angles in this huge pattern. And as I stood up, now by myself, still at this far end, 400 some feet away from everybody else, it was as if something just took a hold of me and just brought me down to the furthest end of that circle. And I was standing there looking out at the wheat, and suddenly it was as if I felt like I was being absorbed, and as if something were able to absorb everything about me, and then left me with a residual thought. And the residual thought that was left with me at that moment in England in 1992 was, life is not guaranteed on this planet.
Like a download?
Well, it was a telepathic exchange with something that felt profound. And why I share that is that over the next several years, as people began to be swamped by the so-called hoaxer stories, that the vast majority of people on the planet did not have that experience that some of us had in those early days of the electrostatic walls, the Jell-O, the incredible energy that you could feel inside of these formations that led up, for me personally, with a discussion about 2 or 3 years later with somebody that I think did work for an agency, but we had a discussion in another crop formation in which he said, it's my understanding that the Central Intelligence Agency in the United States is trying to use satellites to photograph as many of the crop formations as they come in chronological order, and they are trying to feed the information in to large Cray computers to see if they can crack or find a mathematical language.
Mm-hmm.
The hypothesis is that the crop formations are related to time travelers, and that the crop formations are markers of how successful the time travelers are in focusing and controlling their time leaps.
Interesting.
That was a discussion in the early 90s.
Right.
Now, if you take all of the crop formations that have happened around the planet, and you take out Wiltshire, which is where the hoaxers have worked the most.
Right.
The astonishing patterns of this past summer in Italy, the summer before, there have been patterns that have just been so extraordinary in other European countries. And they don't penetrate the general news like they did in 89, 90, and 91 because of the successful, quote-unquote, hoaxer overwhelm that just seemed to muck up the relationship of the planet to this amazing phenomena. Are the crop formations time travelers or extraterrestrials who have the ability to work with plasmas, and that it is the spinning plasma that is the energy that is somehow coded with zeros and ones that make the control over living cells and plants that can go down in clockwise, counterclockwise, zeros, ones.
Right.
It's mathematical. It's related to clockwise, counterclockwise in all of the really extraordinary formations, and that has not been confined to England. And so to this gentleman's question, why are we not seeing all of the fantastic formations that have been happening in the planet this summer and the summer before? It's because someone in an agency made a decision in the early 90s, just like Roswell and so many other issues, that the public and the media were not to pay attention, and that it was another counter-intel move to deflect the public and the media from what was really behind crop formation.
Yeah, and cloud everything with a couple of hoaxers, a bunch of hoaxers, and then that's it. Then everything is it becomes funny. You know, it's a joke, and so what you can't separate what's real and what's not. It's all the hoaxers.
And one of the, I'm going to say, perhaps deepest and most profound concerns that I think that agencies and government people have had for a very long time is that they don't entirely understand the agendas, and they have not seen entirely clear help, non-help, friend or foe.
Right.
How complex is the geopolitical territorial conflict between the advanced intelligences themselves that translates into our surface world as pluses and negatives, and that those pluses and negatives have played out throughout our entire human history, and that the geopolitical territorial conflicts have worked in camouflage, deception, and that when you go back into the ancient days of sigils, sigils are where there was a number-letter matrix so that people who were in one particular belief versus another particular belief could communicate with each other without being killed. The sigil, S-I-G-I-L, was related to symbols and patterns that insiders could recognize as their own and trusted and friend. There is something about the sigils of ancient times in a difficult and treacherous planet that I think resonates with something about the crop formations, that why can't all of the extraterrestrial communication just be straightforward to Earth, and here we are, and here you are, and we're not here to hurt you, we can teach you. That's what we would all like.
Right,
we would all
right.
like to sit down at Starbucks with extraterrestrials and learn about the universe.
Right.
The very fact that it isn't happening over centuries the way we would have thought, that there appears to be layers upon layers upon layers of deceit and secrecy, says to me that if there is a conflict between advanced intelligences about what is allowable to do with life, there may not be a dominant competitor. And if there is not a dominant competitor, then the negatives and the pluses may be equally matched. And if there is an equally matched argument, what are the consequences for Earth life and other planetary life that have been mixed and matched at a genetic level by these competing intelligences? That's where it gets tough, Because if the philosophical and religious evolutions on this planet are related directly to the conflict between geopolitical territorial extraterrestrials, then governments worry that the fabric of society, the fabric of your religious fiber could be challenged. And yet, everything in me says, at some fundamental level, if we've been on a planet that for at least 12,000 years, going back to Göbekli Tepe, has been deceived, managed, manipulated, and others protecting, both forces at work, that we humans won't ever have a chance to be compassionate with each other or this planet if we don't learn who we really are and how much other intelligence in the universe has affected us and interacts with our planet. It is almost as if this is a gigantic saga of liberation, that liberation from DNA manipulation is a fundamental liberation, and that all of humanity might change its wars and conflicts if it knew our true relationship with this universe and other intelligences that have made us.
Linda, I want to thank you so much for coming on with us tonight. And behave. We're back up on it. I've got to roll credits here. Thank you so much.
Jimmy, thank you. You're always so fun to interact with. Thank you.
And I'm going to get you on. We got to get you back on. We did do the Dragonfly drones, and we didn't do the sirens around the earth. So have a great weekend. Be safe. Earthfiles.com, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving, Linda, and have a great time tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Happy Thanksgiving.
All the best, Linda. Thank you so much.
God bless.
Linda Moulton Howe, thank you. All right, I'm going to roll credits. We're going to get out of here right now. Everybody have a great, safe Thanksgiving tomorrow. We are rolling on out of here. Thank you to Doug Aldrich and Linda Moulton Howe. Stay tuned. Coming up next is After Hours AM. Special thanks to Keith Rowland and Art Bell. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Kamarian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm and Mark D. Kovar. Thanks to LJ3, Renee, and Jonas. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar. Fady by Dale. Graphics by Method. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro by Spaceboy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving. I got a 4-day weekend coming up. I'm going to party. See ya.